All right, welcome everybody. Looks like we are now live on YouTube. So welcome both to our committee and to those of you that are joining us live on YouTube. Thanks for taking the time out this morning to join us. For those of you who are watching the live stream, just to as sort of if you're looking to plan your morning, this meeting should go about an hour, maybe a little over hour and 15 minutes. So if you're looking again to just kind of plan out what you've got going, expect that time frame. So I know that our committee chair, Mike Lovinguth of Rupe Jesuit, was in a meeting this morning. He is on, but he's heading back to his office. So as soon as I see him pop up on the video, I'll know he's ready to go, and I will turn it over to him to run us through the meeting this morning. But we've got some additions to the agenda that I do want to bring up to those of you, again, who are watching via live stream. We are going to discuss this morning the individual game minimums, which is something that we as a committee did have a proposal for last year and discussed. Ultimately, the committee felt like that proposal was not worth bringing forward to the Legislative Council. But again, there continues, I think, to be some concerns around those game minimums. So we will bring that up for discussion again this morning. And then some postseason location questions as well that Ty brought up to the committee. Again, that one, not really an actionable item, but something that I think clarification is wanted and needed. So we can certainly talk through that as a committee as well. So with Mike still off camera, I'm just going to go ahead and jump right into the CHSAA report. And then hopefully by the time I'm finished and we answer any questions, Mike's ready to go and he can run us through the rest of the meeting. So I don't have a whole lot for you all this morning. We do have just a couple of things that we do want to discuss. There's one item in particular that I'll cover last that I think the committee we do need to start thinking about and looking at maybe what next steps will be on that. But we did have an expanded 2A bracket in the fall for the first time this year. We expanded from 16 teams to 24 teams. I think ultimately that ended up being a huge success. I know there was some concern originally with expanding that bracket is, do we have the parity at 2A to have a necessity for that 24 team bracket? But if you look at those first round games, all but one were 2-goal games, very close. Those second round games, even all but maybe I think two were within two goals as well. So I think you're seeing, which is great, some of that parity that we've enjoyed the last couple of years at 4A and 5A. We've had 32 seeds beat the 1 seed is starting to trickle down. You're seeing it now at 3A. You're seeing it at 2A. I would say that soccer, in my opinion, is probably one of the most competitive sports that the association offers, as far as on any that any given Sunday sort of mentality that anyone can really beat anybody. Seeds really don't seem to matter, and which is great to see in a tournament when you've got that parity and you've got that competition and just the level of quality that we have in soccer. So 2A, I think that expanded bracket ultimately was a success. And I know that there was discussion among those 2A schools as that 2A classification continues to grow, and it's seeing numbers that are similar to 3A, 4A, and 5A is down the road. Do we expand even further where the 2A bracket is at 32 teams, just like 3A, 4A, and 5A? So I think that's the next point of discussion and something that we'll look at. But I think just after one boys season, it looks like it's certainly a possibility. As far as how postseason tournaments went with the girls in the spring of 24, boys fall of 2024, I think ultimately the girls was a huge success. We saw tremendous increases in spectator turnout. Our numbers were great. We had some phenomenal games. Again, we're seeing parity on the girls' side that we've not seen before. Again, where you're seeing seeds that are maybe lower advancing deeper into the postseason, which is great to see, and it's a sign of success. And so I was very, very happy to see that. The boys' season this year, again, some great games, some great matchups. We did run into some weather issues with the boys season. And I just want to thank our just the membership as a whole for the flexibility. I know we had some schools that were getting community support and plowing fields, and we had historic November snow. And so just want to really thank all of our schools that went above and beyond to make sure that we could provide excellent events for our student athletes. And so thank you to all of you who did contribute there. I want to also thank Dick's Sporting Goods Park for stepping in last minute to help us provide an amazing championship opportunity for our students. So that was something that we were very, very thankful for as well. Looking forward, we've got several new schools that are going through the membership process right now, looking to come on board. Many of those new schools, it seems like every time that we have new schools that come on, soccer is always a sport that they're looking to offer. This past year, we had 235 girls soccer teams, 225 boys soccer teams, which are the highest numbers that we've ever seen. And as we continue to increase the membership with schools adding that seem to always bring on soccer, girls soccer specifically, which is great to see. Those numbers will continue to go up. So the future is very, very bright for the sport. Very excited about that. And so we are looking forward to, hey, we've talked about 1A in the past, and that's something that, again, might come up as we continue to add schools, and we're seeing numbers that we've never seen before. Now, the piece that I did want to discuss, and I said was a bit concerning, as Colette and I were going through some of the data that we had revolves around red cards. And I think that's something that this committee is going to need to look at, and we're going to need to come up with some solutions here. But we've got some numbers, and they're just numbers from this year and last year to just kind of compare. And as we were going through these, I almost thought Colette wasn't looking at the right sheet because they're quite surprising. So if you look at girls 2023, the number of red cards given out for players was 27. Boys 2023, the number of red cards given out was 206. So we had 206 red cards given to boys in 2023, 27 to girls. In 2024, we had 39 red cards. So again, it's trending up, which is a concern, but I think that number with the number of girls teams we have isn't rising to the level of concern. 39 red cards in girls 2024. In boys 2024, this fall, we had 242 red cards given out to players. Concern there. When you look at coaches, girls 2023, we had 5 red cards given out to coaches. Boys 2023, so last fall, 18 red cards given out to coaches. Girls 2024, so last spring, there were only 4. Went down, was great to see. Only 4 red cards for girls coaches. Boys coaches this fall, 30 red cards. 30 red cards to boys. So, I'm not sure right now what the reason is. It's something that, Ken, maybe you can chime in if there's anyone knows kind of why we're seeing, but to see 39 red cards for girls and 242 for boys, I think we've got something that we need to look at. So just want to throw those numbers out. And I think it's worth discussion on kind of how we're going to look to address this moving forward. Mike, I see you're on screen now, so that's all I have. If there's questions with Mike, I'm going to turn this back over to you.
Great. Thanks, Justin. And thanks everyone for bearing with me while I walk around the giant construction pit that is our school right now. So, I just want to welcome everybody to the committee and thank you all for your time. This has been a rewarding committee chair position for myself, and I'm always happy to talk soccer. So, welcome to the committee and welcome to everybody online. And a couple of good topics to talk about, and I think we should stay on the CHSAA report. So, if there's any discussion on Justin's presentation, let's do that right now.
I guess my question would be to the committee is what maybe Stephen, as a coach's rep, you've got some thoughts here. What can we do? Because I think something's got to be done or looked at, or there's got to, how can we lower this number? I mean, 242 red cards, 30 coach ejections is something that we just we just don't see those numbers even. There's no comparison with other sports. They're just that high. And I understand soccer is different, in the fact that denying an obvious goal scoring opportunity or something along those lines could lead to an ejection, and some of those are that, but there are a lot of dissent and things like that where we are seeing red cards given for things like that are not seen in other sports, and so we just got to. I think as a committee, we've got to figure out what we can do to address that, because I think it's something that needs to be done.
Yeah, I think Justin, my question on this is, right, what is the categorization of them, right? Because like you said, there are some that are part of that piece, right? Like the denying a goal scoring opportunity and otherwise. But if we look at the numbers on the boys' side, that's just over one per team throughout a season, and significantly lower for the girls, and coaches is over 10% for the boys, and again, significantly lower. So I think if we could have more disaggregated data on that, on where our focus points could be, that might be helpful as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Colette, maybe you could even start working on some of that, because we have what each one is for. Yeah, Colette's saying yes. So maybe, John, she could probably start to put some of that together as we're in this meeting, and maybe by the time we're done, we might even have something that we can share.
Hey, Justin, from the referee's perspective, yeah, it is useful to look at, what's the second yellow, what was dissent, what was, violent conduct, what was serious foul play, dog throw, etc. I think the key thing to bear in mind here, though, is it's not the absolute number, it's what's the increase, because I'm pretty sure if you look at 23 and 24, the percentages of each type of card are probably going to be similar. It's just there's a lot more of them. Boys' games are more intense, they're more physical, but that shouldn't equate to coach reds, even if the game's more intense. And the coach increase for the referees is the most concerning part. The referee has more control on the field. Sometimes cards are used for game management, game control, but the coach numbers are very concerning.
I think I could be speaking ignorantly until we get the categorization data, but I truly think they could work hand in hand. For me, everything goes back to leadership. And if there are players taking last man reds, which is pulled a jersey to deny, I'm not agreeing with that. That's just one aspect. Studs up, breaking a player's leg, which sounds extreme, but happened to our team last year. And then the coach just kind of pats them on the back. And you have these fouls that are late, that are egregious. You have coaches that are unhinged, that are screaming at refs and dropping F-bombs. It's just leadership. It's not, there's something that needs to be done. And I think that's why we're here, from a leadership coaching aspect of why is that tolerated? Those numbers are appalling, in my opinion, that we have that many coaches taking reds that are supposed to be models and mentors for their kids, and they're popping off in this manner. So I'm not trying to take a moral high horse. I'm just trying to say, what do we do to help offset? And I'm not trying to be heavy-handed with legislation with the coaches, but something needs to get done, because there's obviously a systemic problem with both the coaches and the players for the guys' seasons.
Yeah, and that's what stood out to me the most too, Cyrus, is that we've got. I mean, if you look at it, the officials that are officiating, the boys and the girls, are by and large the same. It's the same officials group. We have more girls teams. There's more girls games, and yet we have 4 girls coaches that are ejected and 30 on the boys' side. I'm struggling to understand why that's happening, and so I guess, yeah, that's my point. Is, yeah, how can we identify that issue and hopefully solve it? But I would also say, as this data is coming in, and this is just going from seeing the reports coming in every day, my guess is that if we're going to look at these reports, the number of dissent reds on the boys' side is going to be so far above the girls. I would say the majority of these girls' reds are going to be for play on the field. Whereas you're going to see quite a few boys' reds that are going to be for dissent towards officials. So that's just, again, that's, maybe I'm wrong, but again, as I see those coming every day, that's just my feeling as how this is going to shake out.
Justin, could you remind us, is there, if a coach gets a red card, and obviously they have to sit out a number of games, but do they then have to do some sort of or does the AD turn something into CHSAA about kind of what
Yeah,
happens
so
next season?
Yep. So they would go on probation. They'd have to do some NFHS courses, sportsmanship, modeling, teaching behavior. They would sit out 2 games for that first ejection, as opposed to, a player having to sit out just the one. We did bring that 2-game suspension in a few years back because we were seeing an uptick in coach reds, and we felt like that would, that additional punishment may, give a coach second thought as to, continuing a discussion or an argument with an official, and maybe we'd see a decrease, but that appears not to have worked here. So, yeah, so I think us thinking of some ideas, what might, what may work. We do have a bylaw in place where, a second and a third red for a coach would, ultimately result in restriction, which would limit their ability to coach in the postseason. Fortunately, we have not seen that. So maybe, as we look at that and we say, well, maybe that restriction piece or whatever the additional punishment is hindering those additional cards. If maybe the first one was punishable by something a little bit more severe, that we would see a reduction from even the first red. I don't know. And again, there are some situations, certainly, I don't want to say all red cards are the same, and there are some potentially where coaches feel like they were given out and maybe not deserved, but I would say that's not the case for 30 of them. So something needs to be looked at, and maybe some ideas that we have, Stephen, if you maybe even would want to talk as a coaches group, look at something that we can do there. But I think we need some ideas on how to move forward and how to get this number down, because to go from 18 to 30, that's pretty alarming.
Justin, I know this is probably going to be apples and oranges, but as an association, have we seen an uptick on all levels and all sports of coach ejections as well? Or is this just a systematic issue in boys and girls soccer, more so boys?
Yeah, I've not seen that again, and I don't see the numbers for sports outside of the ones that I oversee. But I have not, Colette and I have not seen these numbers. They stay usually pretty steady, like you do see for girls, 5 in 2023, 4 in 24. That's pretty consistent with what, I would say if we were to look at boys lacrosse. I know those numbers in front of me right now, like boys and girls lacrosse, I would say those numbers are around your, single digit, 5, 6, 7. Now, there's obviously far more boys soccer teams than there are boys lacrosse teams, 3 times as many. But I don't think that we probably have 7 times as many ejections for 3 times as many schools. So that's, yeah.
I know the report that Sullivan sends out for football, there was an uptick for football ejections this year.
Were there? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think probably one of the most basic or preliminary proactive measures before we get the data that can shed some light on the nature of these red cards is, and I know it might add more work to you, to Justin and Colette, is sending an email to the accountability for the athletic directors that, hey, meet with your coaches. There needs to be higher accountability between the AD and the coach, that this needs to be remedied. And we have to mitigate the amount of dissent and egregious reds between the players and the coaches. So I know that's not a full stopgap, but until we get data, that might be a good, as we enter the girls' season, a good first measure.
Yep. I would just put on this committee to as you all go back, a lot of you are the czars for your individual leagues, to just please go back and bring this topic up among your coaches and just get some feedback on what they feel. And, a lot of your coaches probably coach boys and, and girls, and say, listen, why do we have 30 boys coaches ejected and 4 girls? What are you seeing? What do you feel the reason is? And then maybe that'll help us understand. But I think we need to at least start this discussion among our leagues, and then try to figure out, maybe what the issue is and how we can address it. So,
yeah, I think. Oh, sorry, Stephen, go ahead.
Okay, I just had maybe just another follow-up for data on your end.
Sure.
As I'm sitting here thinking, what can we do as a coaches association to help educate? I'd want to make sure we're educating the right people. And so I'd be curious in the data to find out how many of these red cards are kind of repeat red cards year after year. How many of these coaches are continuing on out of these 30 cards and continuing to coach the team? Because and I can only speak anecdotally here. I went through a whole season, actually the last few seasons, I haven't seen a red card on our schedule on the boys or the girls side. So I'd just be curious for maybe just a little bit more data on the coaches side. I know it's harder to do that than it is for the player cards as you're kind of sifting through dissent versus dogso and all of that.
Yeah.
But for me, that would be a really important metric, I think.
Yep.
Sorry, Ken, go ahead.
No, you're fine. I think I think communication is a big key here. I think just sharing these numbers, the shock value within the soccer community will have an effect. I mean, there was a shock value just with this committee looking at the numbers. I think also moving forward, I think certainly as the referee group, we can work closely with Justin and CHSAA and also the coaches group to set expectations. I think it's key that we're all on the same page because there are, of those 30, I'm sure there were a couple where it was basically the clash between the referee and the coach, and a different referee or a different coach, that doesn't happen. So those things do happen. So I think if we can lay out expectations on the technical area, coach behavior, what's acceptable and not acceptable, then we get some consistency and expectations are set. And if you're not meeting those expectations, then there's consequences. So I think there's some easy communication things we can do. If we get them in place for the spring season where there's obviously less happening, then we get it in place and we practice it so that when the boy season comes along next August, we have some time under our belt with, again, communicating those expectations and what's going to be allowed and not allowed.
I have some numbers to share.
Okay, perfect.
I just looked through them all, quick rough count. But for boys players this past season, 30 of the red cards was for dogso, 53 violent conduct, 97 2 cautions, 35 for foul and abusive language, 13 serious foul play, 6 taunting, and 2 dissent. For coaches, it was 6 foul language, 12 2 cautions, 7 dissent, and 3 taunting.
Yeah,
yeah.
None of that seems appropriate. So for the coaches, I wonder, Justin,
a lot of those second yellows, if we went deeper into some of those numbers, would probably also the second yellow was because of dissent.
Justin, I wonder to Ken's point about communication. I wonder, we have kind of a distribution system here where we, like you said, the soccer czars. Could we just put out these numbers to those soccer czars and ask them to bring it up at their next league meeting and just maybe have that 5-minute discussion and then report back to the committee?
Yeah.
Do you think we'd get a good amount of data from that?
Yeah, I think so for sure. And we can, I think a good time might be as some of the czars are going through their like maybe spring coaches meetings with coaches and bring that up and then, report back, follow up with some of the boys coaches. I think that would be a good time to get some of that info, and we can kind of, in the meantime, Colette and I can kind of try to break down some more, because the second yellow is going to be a bit confusing. I'd like to break that one even down on what that second yellow was given for, so that we could categorize that a little bit.
Yeah,
I'd like to see what it is, 5A, 4A, 3A, 2A, so we know, and then regional. Like, is it a region area? Is it certain areas where we need to talk to officials, or is it where certain area where we have an issue within a district or whatever it might be?
Okay. So by classification, by area of state. Sure. Yeah, I think that's all. Yeah, I think that would certainly answer some questions too.
And you can pull from there if there's 30 How many have been in repeat schools? You have a coach that's 2 years in a row getting a red card. That's a problem. One's a problem, but two's a bigger problem.
Sure.
Same with players.
Yep.
We can also do that for referees.
Yeah. It sounds
we
like the
can
coach thing isn't happen though, right? Right, Justin? Because that would be that restriction phase, and we haven't put coaches on restriction in a while, right?
Correct. We've had a few. Now, we've had some seconds. Yes. Third
Okay.
is where you see the second is a meeting with CHSAA. And then at the third one is when you see the restriction. I've been here 5 years. I've not seen I've not had a coach receive a third ejection in any sport. So we have seen some players get a third ejection, but I've not seen a coach. Yeah, perfect. So yeah, Colette and I will over the next probably this week and next try to start getting this data really narrowed in, and then we can send it out, and then hopefully we'll just send it. I think easiest thing to do will be we'll just send it out to the czars, so every league czar and the committee, and then let the committee look at it, and then have the czars take it back to their leagues and hopefully get some info back to us.
Great. Any other discussion on Justin's CHSAA report? All right, hearing none, let's move on to the officials report. Ken, you're up.
Thanks. Well, now that we've talked about all the bad stuff, I don't need to talk about red cards. So I think overall, from the referee's perspective, a very successful season. Between 23 and 24, we saw a huge jump in numbers. We currently sit at the end of this season at 423 referees statewide. That's an increase of about 100 from summer of 23. So in general, we've recruited a lot more young referees from the club side. We've had some very experienced and qualified transfers come in from out of state at the college level, and we've persuaded most of them to do high school. We now, I think, have 37 college referees officiating high school. So the ironic thing about all the yellows and reds is we probably have a more qualified group than we ever have had. Maybe that's part of it, that they have expectations and they're not going to put up with stuff that, either older or less qualified refs are going to put up with. But we can dig into those numbers. Certainly I see all the red card reports too, and I don't think there's a trend there of more experienced and qualified refs being overly officious. I think it tends to work the other way, and they get more leeway and have better game management skills. In terms of what's new, just in looking at both the finals in the spring and in the fall, I think both of those went off very smoothly. 14 of the 16 officials for the girls' finals were college refs. 15 of 16 in the boys' playoff finals were college refs, and the 16th will be joining the college ranks after the summer. I mentioned earlier about recruiting new younger referees. But to put that in perspective, and I don't think we've had some low numbers, but we've never gone this low. The boys 3A final at Dick's 2 weeks ago, the 3A crew have an average age of 25. So that is the youngest we've got. So they're young, they're fast, they're fit, and they're good. They don't get out there if they aren't good. Age should not be a barrier. So that's where we're going to continue to do moving forward. A couple of other points to bring up. In the past, we have really relied on USSF, the club side of the game for education, for qualification and education, as well as obviously the college ranks and all the educational material we go through there. We've actually started in this fall season to do some of our own education seminars specific to the high school game. So we ran 2 of those sessions this fall. We had 140 attendees on average for those 2 sessions. So we're honing in on our game as well as the game in general. The last point I'll make, actually 2 more points. One is we still see problem days on Tuesdays and Thursdays. That is when everyone wants to play. And I don't blame them. Coaches want to get their team together on a Monday before they play on a Tuesday. That really puts, even though we have a lot more refs, the quality is spread much thinner on Tuesdays and Thursdays. To put it in perspective, and this is looking more at the kind of metro and north area, on an average Tuesday and Thursday, there'll be around 50 varsity games. Mondays and Wednesdays, there's 10 to 15. So by default, you're spreading the talent pool really thin on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Some coaches have cottoned on to that and schedule a lot of games Mondays and Wednesdays because they get much better crews. Final piece, Justin and I are working with the assigners to kind of hone in on more soccer-specific assigners rather than football assigners assigning soccer games. So most of the problems that we see in games, when games blow up, it's typically because there's an unqualified referee in the middle of it, or a referee that's kind of out of his depth, while there might be a much more experienced referee on the side or even available and doesn't have a game. So we'll work over the winter with the assigners to tighten that up. The HSSO board already works closely with the assigners to prevent some of these, we call them disaster checks, but we just want to more formalize that and get even better at making sure we have the right people on the right games. That's all I have. So any questions on the referee side?
Yeah, Ken, I think that you and HSSO have done a phenomenal job. I keep saying it. I think you're the gold standard of official associations with this country with what you guys have done. We continue to grow, talking about the youth movement and bringing in younger officials and retaining some of those officials, and our numbers are incredible. I think the level the quality level of the officials, how many are working games at the NCAA level, the high school level. We don't see those types of numbers in other sports. I think it's just goes to all the work that you all put in over the years, and I know that we're very thankful. So
yeah, well, we have forgot to mention we do have a FIFA referee in our ranks who refereed the Women's World Cup final in Australia 18 months ago. And of our college ranks, we now have, I think, 8 national referees. So national referees in the US is the level before you go to, pro or then FIFA. So they're still doing high school because they love it. So long may that continue.
Yeah, I want to echo Justin's congrats and thanks for adding the numbers to the ranks. And I've seen it over the last few years. The level of refereeing has definitely increased. So thanks for your work on that. Anything else for Ken? All right. Hearing none, I'd like to welcome Stephen. Welcome to the committee, and love to hear what the coaches have going on.
Thanks, Mike. Pretty short report from me. I took over for Sean kind of midway through the first part of the season. So I'll just bring you guys up to speed a little bit on what the Coaches Association has been working on. My main focus was to make sure that all state voting went really well and smoothly this year, picking up where Sean left off. We did have, I think my main goal, hopefully we can maybe share some thoughts on this as well, is increasing participation from schools in that all-state voting process. You know, in 2A, 4A, 5A, 2/3 of schools participated. In 3A, it's down to only half of schools participating. And that, I think, was noted by coaches and mentioned a little bit, you know, where are these nominations for these other schools? And unfortunately, we can only go so far as, you know, schools want to participate. And so, well, I think it went really smoothly and it was very successful. It would be good, I think, to maybe get more schools involved in that process. Some ideas were brought up in terms of, you know, can we get ADs more involved in reminding coaches and all of that? And maybe some of the discussions that we're having today just around coaching and cards and involvement positively, maybe this is all part of the same thing. But those are a little bit of where our numbers are. So, well, it was very successful. And I think numbers were up over the past few years, maybe even coming out of COVID, because I know numbers were low initially there. It would still be a good thing to kind of emphasize to all of our schools so that kids get recognized for the good work that they're doing. In terms of kind of what we're thinking about going forward, we are talking about coach education and maybe moving our Coaches Association clinic date for soccer so that more coaches can participate. So those talks are kind of ongoing right now. We don't have anything solid, but we've recognized that there may be a need to do some movement there. And then one thing we want to talk about, and I think it kind of dovetails a little bit with the red card discussion we're having there, is we are looking to increase our membership, particularly in the case of young coaches and new coaches. You know, a lot of the coaches that we see and interact with when we meet as an association are coaches who have been with us for a long time. And it seems like right now might be a good time to push for these young coaches to get into the membership so that they can have access to some of those educational opportunities. And we can support them in not only not getting red cards, but in being those positive role models and positive coaches for their kids. And so those are some of our goals. Like I said, I'm just kind of getting in here. I talked with Sean briefly just to make sure we hadn't missed much. It's been pretty quiet on the coaches side, not only from us, but also from United Soccer Coaches. We're kind of, it feels much as you guys are kind of just in the middle of the cycle. So if you have any questions or ideas for me, happy to take those.
I just want to say just quickly, first of all, amazing job coming in, stepping in, filling that role. I think, you know, obviously Sean did a great job and and put you in a good spot, but taking over the All-State, I think the All-State process for soccer is as difficult as it gets with just how many schools that we do have participating in soccer, how many coaches we have, how many players that we have playing. So phenomenal job getting that out. I thought the All-State teams were spot on. Great job there. If there's ever anything that the Coaches Association needs from us as far as helping to increase membership or whatever, please know, Stephen, Sean was always great. Come to me. You guys can always come, and we're always here to help with whatever suggestions you have. Come to us and say, hey, we need this or we need that, and I can promise you that Colette and I will do our best to make that happen. And then I think, again, just overall congratulations. You know, we talked about the negatives with the red cards, and that's not the focus. The focus should be on, I think, if you look at some of these national awards that are going to be in regional awards that are going to be coming out here pretty soon. I don't want to, you know, get ahead of myself or you know, I know some of these aren't announced yet, but Colorado is going to be very well represented with those coaching awards at the national and regional level. And that just goes to the quality of coaching that we have here and the work that the Coaches Association has done. So I think that needs to be mentioned as well as we do have some of the best coaches in the country, the best coaches in the region. And it's going to show with the awards that we'll be getting here in the state of Colorado. So great job with your association and great job to our coaches and the work that they've done as always.
Yeah, thank you, Justin.
Any questions for Stephen? Thanks so much. All right, so let's move on to item 7.1. So this is I believe it was John, game minimum. So John, if I got that right, if you want to introduce that, that'd be great.
Yeah, so in some of the coaches down in Colorado Springs have brought up this idea again of academy kids who are not playing during the regular season or playing very limited that come in at the postseason time, and that skews or upsets and changes how things roll when it comes to the brackets. One of the great things about soccer is you do have an occasional 32 beating a one or something similar to that, but when you have a large amount of kids that don't play in the regular season and then come in for postseason, that can definitely change the dynamic drastically. And so they asked me to bring this up at the committee for discussion to see if there's something that we can move forward with down the road with that.
Yeah, this is, those who remember, this came up last year. I was getting, I haven't heard as much about it this year. Last year, I was getting flooded with communication from coaches that were disappointed with what they thought were kids coming in for the postseason and playing just playoff games and very minimal, if any, regular season games. And so we discussed this. We do have game minimums in other sports. Ice hockey was, I think, the example that I gave last year, last year where the club scene is very, very prominent, and we do see kids that try to play both, and there was an issue, and so the coaches felt like we needed to have a game minimum, and so I think ultimately the committee last year felt like we weren't there yet. But I guess, Stephen, the question: have you heard? Has this been communicated to the coaches association at all? Is there still concern from coaches on kids that are playing in the postseason that are not participating in the regular season?
No one has reached out to me specifically on this. I feel very comfortable speaking for the coaches on this, I think, and saying that this is certainly something we need to look at because I don't think it's a problem that's going to fade away. I think it's here to stay. And I think that eventually you're going to start seeing the same thing on the girls soccer side as well as the club calendar expands. I think it's something that needs careful discussion, but I wasn't told to bring it, but I will say those conversations do happen across the state. What are we going to do about this in the future?
Yeah, again, I would say that, yeah, I don't see this as an issue that will go away. And so I think it's something that's definitely worth it. Just so, everyone knows, the ice hockey rule is there are 19 games in the ice hockey season, and then a player must participate in at least 13 over the course of a season to be eligible to participate in the postseason. And now that could be 13 JV and varsity. So as an example, 10 varsity, 3 JV games as a means to getting to that number. Now, ice hockey is a little bit different in that you don't typically have a stacked JV varsity. So there's not typically a JV game at 4 and a varsity game, at 6. They're usually on different days. And so that's why you saw those numbers spread across JV and varsity. Soccer is a little different. So you could, hypothetically rush a kid in the last maybe week or two and play them back-to-back JV varsity games. So that's something that I think that we would need to consider there. But if there is a number, that's kind of what ice hockey does. And the reason was because you had kids that were showing up on rosters literally just when the postseason happened. Now, there is a waiver process. So as an example, if a kid were to have a knee injury and only came back maybe a week before the season, or maybe there was some type of family emergency and they were gone for 2 or 3 weeks and they missed games, there is a waiver process, and there is a waiver committee, which is made up of one representative from every league, and we meet before the postseason and we look at the waivers and approve and deny those. So there is that process as well. But I think something, if a league does want to bring forward a proposal down the road to be discussed for next year, I think it's something that's definitely, I think the coaches should be bringing this up at their meetings. You all should be bringing this up at your meetings as leagues ours. because I do think that it's an issue that's going to continue. And if we want to see something done, then I think we should probably act sooner than later.
Just on the other side, I was just looking at the scores from five that someone had talked about a lot of upsets happening in the playoffs that might have shaken things up. And I don't think there was actually a lot of true upsets in those. Like if you look at the seeding index of how they were. So I think the last meeting we asked for statistics about how many kids this is, or how many teams, or if this was just disgruntled coaches who fell in the first round where they felt like they should have gone further, or is this like the state championship team was made out of, was like Cherry Creek suddenly pulling kids from the MLS? So I think before we just use anecdotal statements from coaches about how they feel, there does have to be statistics about what this is affecting.
Yeah, and we did see far fewer upsets this year. That's in the fall for the boys. Certainly less than in years past. And I'm not even sure, Veronica, if the upsets that we've had previously were because of I think of parity and just the depth of quality, players that we have plays a large role. But I think there's also, some situations where there probably are some players coming in, but I don't think it's necessarily, 10 beats 1. It's because of that.
Justin, can I follow up on that just briefly here? I think this is probably us getting ahead of a problem more than it's us catching up. I can tell you from experience, the academies are not jumping at the opportunity to release their players to us. That's definitely not happening. But I agree with the need to get some stats on it. I don't think it will look like a huge problem on paper. But I do think that with the expansion of club in the last 5 years, and that continued growth that's going to continue to happen because the game is growing, this is probably, it's worth getting all those numbers out and getting ahead of it rather than getting caught by it later.
And I'm not like opposed to having a minimum. I also just think that there should be some thought process about what is the minimum amount and not like, and why we're choosing that amount before we just arbitrarily choose a minimum game amount as well.
Yeah. 100% agree. Yeah.
So that would be, Justin, something we would be looking for at the next committee meeting to come from a league, correct?
Yeah, and so really, we talked about it. It seemed to be a big issue that came up last fall, and I was getting flooded with it. I heard nothing on it in the spring with the girls. I didn't hear really anything on it this fall with the boys, and so that's why you didn't see anything on the agenda or discussion. So I wasn't sure, but it sounds like maybe it still is an issue. And so really, I would just right now, before we kind of move forward with any additional info, I would like to hear from the czars, and maybe that's an email that we'll have to send out from each league. Hey, how much of an issue do you feel like this is in your league? And I can send out a survey just to the czars, because if we overwhelmingly get back from 9 out of 10 leagues that say we're not concerned about this at all, then I'd rather spend our time working on something else. But if 9 out of 10 come back, or even half come back and say, yeah, this is an issue, then it's something that we can start to collect data. But after the meeting last year, we really did not hear anything else. I expected to get a bunch of emails after this committee decided not to move it forward on how did we not do something, and there really weren't any. And then I didn't hear any emails during the girls season. So I would say let's take this back to our leagues. Spring certainly seems to have some concerns there, and if maybe there's just some other leagues that haven't voiced their opinion, let's hear it. I'd love to hear it. If there are concerns, then let's address them. And then we can start figuring out some of that data that Veronica was asking, like, hey, what does the number look like? What's the percentage of players that you've had? And sometimes that information is tough to give because it would require someone to maybe to give out info that they're not necessarily looking to give. But yeah, trying to find, hey, how many kids did you have on your team that played fewer than 8 games or whatever, maybe whatever number we feel like is a number we want to look at as a potential for the minimum, and then say, well, how many did you have that played less than that, and then get go from there.
Yeah, I wonder if Max Preps has the capability to do some of that data dive for us.
We went to them. It was tough to get some
Yeah.
reports
Yeah.
from them specifically on that. We did send them some requests, and they've had some turnover, and so it really was hard for us to get, we were trying to get some overtime data, and that was difficult. So I think really I think for me, let's find out which leagues feel like this is a concern. If there's quite a few, then let's pursue this.
Okay. That sounds great. Yeah, and Stephen, I think you were spot on that I think the Coaches Association probably plays some role here as well in terms of kind of what we should look at and where the problems are.
I will be happy to send that out to the association and see if we can get some feedback for you guys.
Great. Any other discussion on 7.1 game minimums? All right. And then 7.2 postseason locations. I forgot who brought that up.
So that was Ty.
That's right.
And wanted that for discussion. Ty and I had kind of gone back in some emails and some discussions, and like I said, Ty, definitely happy because no one's come to me with this, and I've not really heard any concerns. Happy right now though to talk about some of just the background, the reasoning. But I would say, Ty, really, if you have some people or some groups that are asking these questions, I'd love to be a part of those discussions and just give you some info. But I think the question that Ty brought forward was, what about, I think the example was a semifinal being hosted by the higher seed as opposed to a neutral site. And, in my opinion, we've worked pretty hard over the last couple of years to enhance that experience for our athlete in like a DU, a UCCS, a UNC, Colorado Christian, the NAC being one of the top grass fields, Western, Colorado Western, and some of these venues that we've used, again, to try to increase and enhance that experience. I don't know of many kids that would say, hey, we would have preferred to play that semifinal at Northfield High School as opposed to Denver University. The issue we also run into is just around facilities. I can tell you, I'm not taking phone calls from parents. They're going to say, why am I playing a CHSAA state semifinal at 2:00 in the afternoon at Mullen High School in November when I could be at, a UCCS or a UNC or a DU. We've got too many facilities that don't have lights, that don't have bleachers, that don't have locker room access. And so when we're talking about a state semifinal at a Kent Denver, at a Mullen, at a CA, at a Crested Butte, they'd have to be played at 2:00. And that's just something that we couldn't do to our parents and to our student athletes as an experience. Hey, you're going to play a state semifinal at 2:00 in Crested Butte. Parents, good luck getting there. And then I think the other reason is that we, again, just is some of the reasoning why we do this is that we've seen an increase in the visibility around these events when we can bring them into one central location as opposed to spread out among all schools. And so we've got, media and sponsors that are able to say, hey, yeah, we'd love to be able to cover this 5A event here in one location as opposed to be in, 16 different places for the different games that are hosted. And then a lot of it's around, cost for the association. And so when you look at the ability for us to pay for a Dick's Sporting Goods Park or to pay for a facility like Widener Field, a lot of that revenue, and it's not a lot, but when you can go over 4 classifications, the small revenue that we are able to bring in from some of these games with increases to ticket takers and to venues and to workers and to officials, it does. We would not be able to be at Dick's Sporting Goods Park. We would not be at Widener Field without the revenue that we are able to bring in from semifinals as well. That money does go towards to paying for those events. And so we would not, I can tell you right now, we would not be playing at Dick's Sporting Goods Park without that. So those are some of the reasons. for having it. But again, I think overall experience, like I said, I can't think of one kid that would have been like, yep, Northfield High School is where the semifinal should be, as opposed to DU. And so that's the reasoning, and that's kind of what we're looking at for that.
Yeah, and I think mainly it's around the 5A quarterfinals, right? All being down at All City is really what it is, comparative to the other quarterfinals. I think that's where the main issue lies.
Okay,
Where
so
I
sorry,
think
you had mentioned semifinals. So that's
yeah,
sorry.
semifinals. It was brought
Yeah.
to me as quarterfinals and semifinals. I think if there could be a move, I think the easiest move would be quarterfinals 5A being at the home site instead of at All City.
Yeah, I was going to echo on that and ask Justin. You said because of the revenue, is that the main reason why to continue 5A at a neutral site instead of the higher seed for 5A having it theirs?
Cyrus certainly plays a factor, and again, it's the margins we're working with are razor thin, and so you're not looking at high amounts of money here that are being brought in on these games, and so when you're able to increase that revenue and the costs I mean, they're just skyrocketing. If I could show you what prices are from when I got here in 2019 to what they are now, it's certainly a small factor that goes into it. I'll be honest, I also have coaches that say that we do prefer the ability to bring this event to one central location and be able to see all these other games and to see, we looked at Cyrus when we first did this, we were looking at attendance, right, from across 4 games, and the attendance went up significantly when you had this event, which was a 5A quarterfinal where you're able to see multiple games on multiple days and people come out, and we were seeing an increase in student tickets because what was happening is that when you have a game at, let's just say, school A and school A against school B at school A, school B students weren't showing up. They just weren't coming. Whereas opposed at a neutral location, they were. And so we were seeing that increase in visibility amongst the student sections. And really, I think that's the community that we want to promote these games towards. And so to see that increase in student ticket sales was something that we thought was a positive, to increase that ability for kids to come to a neutral site, because the difference in student ticket sales at a neutral site, the parents will always be there. The difference in ticket sales from neutral to a home site was significant. So that's another.
No, that makes sense, Justin. My question would be not to argue, but
no, of course,
why not have that continuing with 4A, 3A, and 2A?
Yeah, great. That's a great question. And there is a reason. The reason we would do it, honestly, I would do it at 4A and I would do it at 3A. If you look at 5A, all the schools are along the I-25 corridor. And so my concern right now is that with the quarterfinal, I don't want to get into a situation where I've said in a 3A quarterfinal where potentially 50% of the schools are West Slope schools, that I want to bring you into Denver and increase your travel. That's not what I want to do. With 5A, because I do, if you ask me my opinion, Cyrus, would a 4A quarterfinal at, let's just say, a UCCS be a better event? Yes, it would. But I think the risk that I would run there with 3A and 4A and 2A would be that the increase in travel would put an undue burden onto those schools. Whereas with 5A, everybody is along the I-25 corridor and the travel is minimal, if any. And in some situations where, if, like I'll just use Fossil Ridge as an example, having to maybe play Mountain Vista or somebody could hypothetically decrease your travel there. And so that's the reason why we do it. I think it would enhance the experience for all the classifications. It's just that I don't want to have the travel with those, because when you're talking about an 8-team quarterfinal, when you look at 3A, when you look at 4A, when you look at 2A, historically and consistently, there's been more spread among who those schools are. And so it's difficult for me to pinpoint one location that would make sense. That's the reason why. It's not because I don't think the experience would be better, because I think it would. Because I can't tell you how many complaints that we get throughout the postseason where they show up and say, well, we're playing a quarterfinal at this school and their field is, 105 by 55, or they've got no locker rooms. We couldn't get access to this. We couldn't get access to that. We get complaints consistently on those things. Now, a lot of you as hosts might think, hey, this is great. We've got an advantage here. This is the field we play on. But we do get, and if you look at almost every other state across the country that we would want to compare ourselves to, if you look at where those late round contests are hosted, always 100% at a neutral site. Any state of any substance when it comes around athletics, they don't play quarterfinal games at host schools. It just doesn't happen, and it's for the reasons that I laid out there. But the travel is the big piece there for lower schools.
Well, that's the irony. Back in coaching in California, we had for Northern California, there was not a ton of travel. I mean, the longest game was, dear God, we have to go to San Francisco, which is 45 minutes away.
Sure.
Where here you have you can have a Frontier traveling to Roaring Fork in the
and a mountain range that separates you. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Colorado is very unique in a lot of ways, but that's the reason. Like I can tell you that, when you look at like basketball, a lot of the schools were in love with, hey, this is a great experience to be able to go to the Coliseum, and we want to have that opportunity. We want to be able to play, and as a casual spectator as well. I used to go and watch those games, because I could watch a lot, as opposed to having to go and pinpoint. I never went to a single basketball game, but when I could go watch four, I went more. And so like I said, we saw an uptick in the amount of people coming out. You saw an increase in the visibility of the sport. And I think that was when we said, hey, this is increasing visibility. We're seeing more people showing up to these games. We're getting more casual fans. We're getting that younger kid that's coming out because they want to come sit and watch four games all day. Maybe their club team comes out. That's happening more. And I think you're seeing, as I talk about our numbers and our participation increasing, I think a lot of it is because of the visibility now that we have with this sport. And I think part of that is because of what we've done the last couple of years with the venues and some of the things that we've done around increasing postseason events.
I just think from the AD perspective, I think we're going to see a lot of change in wanting to move those quarterfinals, even Elite Eight for basketball or whatever it might be, back to a home site because of the way the TPNF report works now and the money around that. That's just
Ty,
talk.
I totally get that. I guess my counter argument would be, and listen, trust me, I look at these margins, especially in some of the sports I oversee. We're talking razor thin. I don't have basketball and football where you've got 10,000 people in the stands. So I'm dealing with very, very tight margins. So I look very, very closely at these, and we're not talking about large percentage gate revenues here. And so my pushback would be, are we talking maybe will we say one individual school is going to make a little bit of extra money here, but would that ultimately hurt the overall state and the visibility and the growth? We've got to weigh that. Okay. Well, hey, I can make $800 by hosting this quarterfinal, or the quarterfinal could be this event where it's broadcast to the state, and we've got the NFHS network showing the game. The NFHS network will not broadcast, and they do not broadcast any of the 4A, 3A, or 2A because they are spread out. We've got this increased visibility on the sport with the NFHS network, with all this going on. Is that small amount of money that you're going to make as a host school with the way TPNF is? I understand. Trust me, I get the TPNF piece now, but we've got to weigh the pros and the cons there. And I think for me, I would say that the pros in that event being a better event outweigh what I promise you is a very small amount any host 5A school will be walking away with playing a quarterfinal game at their school. That's just my opinion. But we can work and continue that conversation. Like I said, I would love, because people really aren't coming to me. I would love to be a part of these conversations so that we can give, and I can show you numbers and what that would look like.
Yeah. I know Joe's going to bring up to the board.
Okay. Yeah.
As well as I know the district ADs up here with Harry and Chase, and they're talking about it right now. So
Yeah,
I'm
and please,
sure it will be brought up here soon.
okay. Like I said, please, when those are tied, when those, like, say, hey, can we, like, Justin or somebody from Chess would love to sit and even just be a fly on the wall as you guys are talking about that, or
Yep.
be part of the conversation. I'd love to talk through some of those things.
Great. Any further discussion on that? Well, before we call a motion to adjourn, I'd like to thank everybody's participation and thank Justin and Ken and Stephen for their reports. Justin, is there anything else that we need to touch on today?
No, again, I just want to thank the committee, the work that you all have done. Again, I personally think soccer is in a better space right now than maybe any sport that we offer in the association. I think the growth, the number of schools, the parity, everything is just trending upwards. Our officials numbers, officials quality, coaching quality. Like I mentioned earlier, just the number of awards that we're looking at from this state. From a coaching standpoint, it's phenomenal. Soccer's in a great spot, and I think the committee plays a large part in that. I just want to thank you guys and appreciate your time, obviously, this morning as well.
I totally agree. So, all right. If there's anybody who wants to motion to adjourn, I'll hear that.
And I said an hour and 15 minutes. That's almost.
We're right on target. It's great.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motioned and seconded. All in favor? Anybody
Thanks, everybody.
opposed?
Appreciate
Thanks,
everybody.
all.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks, Justin.